Hey, folks, John Cantera, the double broker bounty hunter here for the Freight Fraud Task Force. And we've got a special panel today for this special live episode to discuss the SCOTUS decision from yesterday on the Montgomery case. I don't think any of us had this decision on our dance card, but this is where we're at. So sit tight. We'll bring our panel up and have one heck of a discussion.
For the Freight Fraud Task Force, welcome to the TikTok Diner podcast, where we serve up freight fraud with a side of prevention. Grab a menu and have a seat. Your server will be right with you. Here is your head chef and host, the double broker bounty hunter, John Cantera.
Oh, yeah, a little nice jazz to get this thing started. Let's go ahead and run through the introductions. We have a lot to talk about. Jeff, start with you, please.
Yes, Jeff Dickinson, owner of RGTX Logistics Solution, been a veteran of the industry for 46 years. Looking forward to this chat on a very important topic.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead with Andy then.
Hey everybody, Andy Sharp, CEO and founder of MeshVI. We're connecting verified insurance down to the live vehicle level. I'm a second generation truck insurance nerd and was shell shocked by the 9-0 decision. I'm curious to see everybody's thoughts on this and share some feedback. I've already gotten some others on the insurance side and some in the legal community.
Oh, that's going to be good stuff for you to share. Next, we have Alex. Alex, you want to introduce yourself?
I don't think he's
Alex
hear you.
I think he can't hear us. Okay, Eric, why don't you go ahead and step in? Eric, you're on mute. Can you hear me? Hello, Eric. Alex. Okay, so apparently Eric and Alex are having a hard time hearing us. They may need to log out, log back in, and they can get back into the conversation. Jeff, can you go ahead and message them in the private chat? Let them know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, apparently they can't hear me either. Okay, but Andy, you can hear me. Jeff, you can hear me. Hey, any of you viewers out there, drop in the comments real quick. Can you let us know that you hear us okay? Apparently somebody's having some technical difficulties. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this started. Yeah, click on private chat and on the right hand side, Jeff, and message them. That should get them going again. Okay. In the meantime, while we wait for them to log out and log back in, let's go ahead and get this thing started. Yes, thank you very much, Acostas. You can hear us. Thank you very much. Okay, let's get this going. This is monumental. Now, Jeff, you've been in the industry for 46 years, and I don't think we have had anything take place in the last 46 years that equates to this other than the Motor Carrier Act of 1980. So, this is huge. Jeff, I want to start with you. You're a freight broker. What were your initial thoughts when you saw this?
You know, it's not a surprise to me, and this is the second most important thing that has happened to the logistics industry, as you mentioned, since the Deregulation Act, June 1980, which I worked through. A lot of folks out there, except maybe their parents who have been in transportation or logistics at that time, compared to what we're seeing today, I am not shocked because of the accountability that has been missing in the industry for a very, very long time. I think it's about time. It's going to shed a lot of brokers out there, out of the industry, carriers. I mean, this is huge. like something that we've never, ever seen before. I'm not surprised.
I'm surprised that the ruling came down the way it was. There was an amicus brief that the government put forth in favor of brokerage and their autonomy to be able to operate within the space. And it appears in an unusual effort that the courts have completely ignored that. And that is something that is unheard of. And also that it was a 9-0 decision.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you read some of the decisions coming from Kavanaugh and whatnot, they do indicate that it was a closer decision than many people think. Being a 9-0, yes, it's unanimous, but I think there are some people that are still kind of on the fence, even though they landed on the same side in the end. But the fact that it's 9-0 is going to, frankly, make this a benchmark moving forward in terms of liability for that brokers are having to face. Eric, you're finally back with us. It sounds like you can hear us now. Go ahead and introduce yourself real quick, and what are your initial thoughts on what happened?
Hey, everybody. I'm Eric Cortucci with OnSite, co-founder and CPO. Yeah, I mean, my initial thoughts with the rollout, I was expecting a split decision, so it doesn't really surprise me too much that it was a close call for the all in on the Supreme Court, all voting in one direction. But yeah, I mean, it like Jeff was saying when I jumped back in, like it's going to have pretty serious impacts across the board, and brokers that were already taking compliance and safety seriously, they're probably going to be mostly okay. With some of the stuff I've read from like Rob Carpenter, great resource, and then also a couple other FreightWaves articles and some other articles in the market that I was reading over the last day. It's pretty clear that as long as you have your ducks in a row already, you're mostly going to be fine. There's going to be insurance cost increases almost certainly. But as long as you're prepared to share with those underwriters what you're doing and how you're doing it and how those decisions on onboarding those carriers and reviewing their credentials every so often, I think that can help mitigate a lot of the impact that's going to happen for brokers there. I guess my heart really goes out to a lot of the smaller carriers that may not be as prepared and smaller brokerages that may not be prepared. It's, anytime government starts making decisions that impact an entire industry, the smaller players typically always get beat out. Which is not something I'm a huge fan of, but that is the reality with regulation. And what's the cost of safer roads for our families? As a father, that's something that goes through my mind every single day when I drive to and from work, or my kids are on the bus going to and from school. It's it is a serious concern, and so it doesn't surprise me the end decision there.
Well, we have just ended the CVSA inspection blitz for May. And I don't know what the final tally was, but I do know that 24 hours ago, we were looking at 32% out of service rate. 32%, 1 in 3 trucks out there on the road today is not only unsafe, but shouldn't be on the road at all. I know I don't like having my wife being on the road in the morning. Right. With those kinds of stats, this is definitely a huge move, I think, in the right direction. Andy, what's your take on this?
Well, Eric mentioned insurance, and that's my background, so that's where I naturally go to. And for those that were at the Broker Carrier Summit, Tommy Rook and I did a lot of talking around this, because no matter what the ruling was going to happen, there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about what insurance does or does not do for the motor carrier and or the freight broker, et cetera. So, for instance, freight brokers are already covered automatically, no additional insured, no certificate holder wording needed on a motor carrier's primary auto liability via vicarious liability. So what this is going to do is going to increase those legal defense costs. At minimum, it's legal defense costs. That's going to be exposure. So the key is, where is that cost going to be paid? Is it going to be paid primarily on the primary motor carriers insurance, a good bit. And then some. I saw an article this morning for one of the top writers, and they had some fallacies in the article about insurance. If you talk to the trucking insurance expertise, the freight brokers think contingent auto and contingent cargo give them a lot more coverage than it actually does. Most of those contingent policies, trying to think of a nice way of saying it, but they're a bunch of crap. The freight brokers are going to need true truck broker liability or primary liability coverage. Tommy Rook talked about freight brokers getting non-owned coverage because that would cover the third-party non-owned vehicles and things like that. But the biggest thing to me is that insurance side of things, because that is where insurance is dispersing everybody's funds to help protect the collective, right? So they can pay lower dollars per, say, claim. Well, that's going to be the biggest thing. I mean, and making sure people understand what they do and do not have from coverage. Because Tommy Rook, when we were at BCS, he went around to every single person. The majority of them were freight brokers in that room. And 100% of the questions he asked were given the wrong answer. It's not because they weren't good freight brokers. It's because there's so much misunderstanding and repeated misinformation given out there that people take it as truth from an insurance monitoring standpoint and all types of things. So that's going to be, I think, the biggest thing. I think there'll be an overreaction by many insurance companies. But I think when the dust settles, it'll just be a big increase in that defense and some claims. And then, like, I'll be speaking with some at the American Trucking Association Legal Forum in a couple months. But I learned last year from some of the attorneys after that Werner case, still comes back to proximate cause. So hopefully more and more claims, forget the freight broker part we're talking about SCOTUS, hopefully more and more of these claims in general will get defined upon proximate cause. Well, if another vehicle crosses, falls asleep, comes across the median and hits the Werner truck, the proximate cause was that, not Werner. So if you get that proximate cause part fixed, then the negligent hiring doesn't matter as much. So there's a lot to it that I think that's starting to evolve, and until there's more case law, there won't be really definitive answers. But excited to see what the industry is going to have.
Fair. We got Alex Snook back with us. Alex, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fantastic. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick and your initial thoughts on the decision.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm Alex Snook. I've been in logistics and freight for about a decade as a self-employed freight broker, co-owner of a trucking company, and now CEO of On-Site, helping shippers with some fraud prevention and efficiency features at the dock. But yeah, my initial thought was, we've been having conversations telling people, hey, we need to educate ourselves, educate our partners, educate our shippers, educate. And it's like you get filled up with so much information, you can only hold so much. And hey, this person should do that, and you should do this. But now that we actually have, it may not be, lots of things, a lot of scrambling, moving parts for sure. Like there's still going to be so much to come from this in the fallout. But it's nice to have something to point to now where we can actually accelerate the conversation and just action too. It's not just going to be just podcasts and just conferences and just information being passed. There's going to be real reactions, steps. Of course, everything's going to be, adjusted or tweaked as we go and as we learn. There's going to be overreactions probably. And there's probably going to be people that also just like, oh, it's still another thing. And then they just won't move. So it's going to be even more of the Wild West, but at least it's something that pushes us to take action. And I guess the synergy of accountability from everyone in the industry is something that I like to see, regardless of where that decision came out. It's nice to see. It looks dark, quote unquote, for some people, darker than for others. But I think over the next several years, it will look back and go, glad that happened the way it did. So those are just my thoughts now.
My initial opinion is this focus is going to open the door towards a safer interstate system. I think what we're going to be seeing is a lot of brokers putting extra attention on the safety ratings that we're seeing in SMS, being more selective about past violations, that carriers may have. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of brokers having discussions over the course of the weekend of, okay, what violations are violations that we don't want our carriers to have a history of, and what's acceptable. Because I don't know of a single motor carrier out there that has a 1,000% flawless record. Everyone's got something on there, whether it's an indicator light was out or something. What is a acceptable violation? What is not an acceptable violation? And that's going to be a huge discussion in the near future for many folks. But the big thing that I think is coming out of this is the documentation necessary in carrier selection. This is going to be the key, I believe, for all freight brokers out there in order to defend themselves when these suits come up, because I don't think it's a matter of if anymore. I believe the armchair attorney, Matt Leffler, said something along the lines of 800 to 1,000 cases have been on pause, waiting on this decision. So there are going to be brokers brought into cases that are currently on dockets, and future incidents are going to also start bringing in freight brokers as a regular defendant. So there's a lot that's going to happen. The question is, brokers, are you able to defend yourself when it comes to providing the necessary standards to shield yourself from the liability? Jeff, what do you think is really going to change in compliance departments over the course of the next few weeks?
They're not going to rely on vetting tools as much as they have been. And here's the thing, too. You're talking about brokers, carriers, and shippers. What about the vetting tool companies out there that say that a carrier is approved, and the broker says, "Hey," or they get into a lawsuit and they're saying, "Well, broker A, why did you choose that carrier?" "Well, I used such and such vetting tool, and it said that it was approved." What about them? What about the insurance on them, Andy? They're going to get pulled into this somehow because, listen, you talk about the TWIC card, right? What is the definition of a transportation worker? It's anybody that moves, touches, organizes, all of that kind of stuff, right? Who's going to fall into that bucket, right? When it comes into procurement, operational guidelines, work instructions, all that. Who provided it? Are they legit? Who audited them? Was there a training program in place, especially when you have to dot the I's and cross the T's to support your choice in what you did and how you did it? I don't think that vetting tool companies out there are going to be absent from legal activities for that simple reason.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about that lately in just the last 2 to 6 weeks from various vetting platforms, and it goes to the misunderstandings out there. So people, I see a lot on LinkedIn, just like, I vetted their insurance, or I checked their insurance. What does that mean?
Correct.
Like if you have a platform that has a 6-month-old COI and it's a 12-unit or a 3-unit account on a scheduled vehicle policy, those vehicles and drivers are probably not the same ones from 6 months ago. So just because you check that platform's old vetting status, that's not vetting. A lot of freight brokers and shippers think those systems are continuously monitoring, but they're not. They're having to ask retail agencies to provide. So they're having to get a third party to provide that information. And so one of the things that Tommy Rook and I were teaching at the Broker Carrier Summit was the certificate of insurance. If you look at the bottom right, it doesn't say 2016, they changed the rules from endeavor to notify to notify per the insurance policy provisions. Well, most insurance policies don't have any notification provisions. So the insurance agencies don't necessarily have to notify the freight brokers of any changes. So that's where the industry is changing to some live vetting systems down to the vehicle and driver level. And one of the big vetting platforms out there, one of the top ones, has been reaching out to insurance agencies to try to partner and integrate more fully. But one of the things that we think is a strategic flaw in that is it puts those insurance agencies at a higher legal liability exposure. So right now they have very little legal liability exposure to notify a third-party platform just because they wanted to be listed as certificate holder. But if you sign a contract with a third party platform to say, hey, we're going to notify you promptly or some kind of legalese like that, and they don't, then those insurance agencies have now a massive legal liability exposure if they're not using a platform that gives that real-time change automatically.
Sure.
So yeah, that's the biggest thing I'd say.
Yeah, because in any kind of data collection, it's get-go, garbage in, garbage out. It's put in there by a human. There's a human element in there that is feeding that information that data source is deciphering, and then in whatever format that you want it in, and it's going to give that out. So I mean, when you look at it logically and saying, well, no, we scraped it, but somebody else put it in there. But how do you know if that data is correct, or if there's some abnormalities in there that they were able to pull it out at the time that the shipment moved, and things.
That's the key, is the time. That word time is so important. You just said.
Yes, and that's the critical thing. I used to build TMS systems a long time ago, helped builders and stuff like that. So I kind of have an idea on that. And the thing is that's just a critical part of this. There's so many different legs to this decision that the SCOTUS did, and who it applies to, and who's going to be brought into this. It's wide. People talk about the transitional aspect of brokerage compared to dedication, where there's a huge difference between the two categories. One, there's no real true partnership, and it switches all the time. So what happens is there's a high probability of fraud when you hit the spot market, because you don't know who it is or what they've done, because speed in logistics has always been the crucial point, but now speed is your enemy. Or when you're under a great deal of pressure and you're trying to move freight, you're going to miss a few steps. Now those steps are going to cause you maybe bankruptcy, or other things that are going to happen to that organization. So you have to, and I've always said this, John knows it, sometimes you have to slow down to speed up to move forward. And this is the time to do it, since this decision was made. You can't arbitrarily just pick a carrier to move the freight because they need it moved in 10 minutes. That's now coming to a hard stop.
Absolutely, especially with AI and robotic process automation, machine learning, et cetera. That speed, what good is speed if you're dealing with garbage data? Or maybe the data is perfectly accurate, but the problem is there's not a reference to the currency of that data. Currents, like when I say that, I mean timeline of it. Is it 6-month-old data that you're still acting on in a fast capacity? Or are you dealing with real-time data in a fast capacity? So that's going to be really key. And one of the things I've seen from a few legal sources since this ruling, it really resonated with me, was what should you have known? That's going to be a big factor. So I think JR made a comment about MVRs. One of the things we talked about, because our platform embeds MVR data, we help their insurance partners run MVRs to more quickly verify is a driver covered or not. So we've talked to freight brokers last year, and they're like, well, we don't want that data. We don't want to know that MVR score because we don't want to get too granular of that data. But just knowing, hey, is that driver MVR being monitored so the motor carrier is aware of any changes on that MVR? That's important, because to JR's point, both the MVR data is relative to the insurance data. Is the insurance going to be covered because of an MVR change?
Yeah,
some won't, but some will.
Yeah, here's a big question for you. And I know that it comes up because, listen, we all work in a blindsided industry. You don't know what's going to happen, but something bad's going to happen on a specific day at a specific time. You just don't know. And most people react to those situations rather than be proactive, unless you've had that experience and you've seen it before. So a carrier is approved at the time of tender and dispatch. In the middle of that transit time, let's just say going from west to east, you're talking a couple of days. All of a sudden, they go from approved to disqualified. Okay? They get into an accident. You have a fatality. What happens next to that? When you're looking at the legalities of, hey, I did my due justice, and at that time, when I used that vetting tool, it said that the carrier was approved. Okay. And then I drilled down into it and I got all the credentials. And now all of a sudden something happened, they had a big fleet, they had an accident or something, they went to, disqualified. What happens at that time?
Yeah, Jeff,
That's a damn good question, and it's going to be difficult to wrestle with. Sorry, Alex, you.
No, you're good. You're just saying exactly. We're on the same wavelength. I think after this ruling, it's all going to come down to not only how does the government respond, but how does the industry respond in a public forum to say, this is the criteria that's going to determine whether a broker. So like, can we as an industry come up with, is it 3 criteria? Is it 13? What are the things that we deem as a broker did its due diligence? I think that's number one, is categorizing and defining what those are going to be, whether the government tells us it, but we're going to have a response, right? I mean, we're already working on a response to say, no. In these accidents, you were mentioning the Werner case, they wouldn't be held liable. So we're already going to come up with our response as an industry. So I think that will get weaned down to like, okay, there's 5 distinct things that a broker or a shipper should do before hiring a carrier. And then the other part was what you were just talking about, Jeff, is the timing. It's not so much what platform are you using or how are you doing it. It's when are you doing it? Correct. And because you said, okay, you tender the load, but what if it's dedicated freight that carrier doesn't pick up till a week from that day? But even on that day, what if it's a 4 p.m. appointment or 8 p.m. appointment? On the day of pickup, something could change 2 hours prior. So who's notified at that? Is it, does the government going to say you're held liable up until the actual ship date? Well, we're going to have, 24/7 shippers that shipped at 12:01 a.m., not 11:59 p.m. There's going to be so many of these little nuances that I'm sure we'll see come up in cases. And I think it's our job as an industry to respond to the government as much as we can. I mean, you could say that, the Supreme Court, got pushed up for all of our voices collectively. Obviously, huge people like, Dale making, huge pushes and always being an advocate day in and day out so that it's always on the top of mind. So, but I think when the vetting is being done, not necessarily the platform, and then what criteria as an industry do we tell the government that we think should be an appropriate amount of liability? That's just where my brain goes to, I don't know, the next 6 to 12 months, as I'm sure everyone's going to be pushing back and forth. No, it should be this. No, it should be that. So,
yeah.
Well, there's going to be conflicting information, I think, coming out. Okay, so the judicial system is what's driving the change today. But I think the judicial system is going to continue to drive that bus over the course of the next 6 months, as other litigation that's going on right now is going to have decisions at the state level. And these decisions at the state level are then going to determine what the timelines are looking like. So, I'm looking as a freight broker who hires a motor carrier to haul load. They pick up today. Tomorrow, FMCSA takes them out of service because they failed their initial audit or they failed to show up for their initial audit. You didn't know that when you hired the guy. So at what point does that liability cut off? Does it cut off at the time that the load is picked up? Does it cut off at the time that the load is tendered? And each state is going to make their own determination on that.
Right.
As these cases go through.
Lines.
So then where do you standardize that? At a federal level, so that there is a standard book to play from. We were talking on yesterday's show about the amount of time that people may be able to go back in trying to bring brokers in on some of these cases. The statute of limitations in most states for a lot of these liability cases is 2 to 3 years. However, in Oregon, it's 10 years. Are we going to see cases that took place 10 years ago in Oregon try to go to court? Most likely not. There was some conversation with Matt Leffler on that topic, and he doesn't believe that that's going to happen. However, it is something that we have to think about. There's no standardization right now. It's now up to the states. So where is the liability actually going to cut off? I want to go to some of the questions that are being posed by the audience. Costas was asking about the liability flow going up to the shipper as a result of these decisions. If brokers are an agent of the shipper, does that then open a conduit of liability going back to the shipper? And Matt Leffler yesterday on Freight Waves indicated yes. Emphatically, it does. The whole reason why shippers hire freight brokers is to be that buffer of liability, to provide that shield, that expert vetting of the motor carriers, and protect the shipper from that kind of liability. So is this going to, from a legal perspective, go back to the shipper? I would certainly think so. And folks, let me go ahead and say this right here and now so everyone understands. Do not take legal advice off of a podcast, right? Even if it's an attorney speaking. Do not take legal advice off a podcast. Hire an attorney, make sure they're on retainer, then take their advice. Okay. So let's just be clear about that. We also got a question from JR talking about information being live data through some of these screening platforms that are out there. And some of the screening platforms are fairly live. And I'm going to say fairly live. Most of them refresh on a daily basis. Okay. Whether or not they refresh at the same time that FMCSA refreshes safer is a big question mark, because I have seen disparities on certain platforms that may even take up to a week before that platform reflects the same status that FMCSA systems are reflecting. So there is a disparity between the two, and that is something that does need to be addressed in order for brokers to make smarter decisions. So the whole just-in-time process that everyone assumes brokers have, I don't think really exists quite to that level. And that's something that is definitely going to need to be addressed. Let's see here. There was something else in here.
I just want to lean in on this one thing, and I think it's a great example. And Rob Carpenter, not so long ago, put this video up there of cargo transport that was pulling a trailer, and it was going southbound on a northbound lane. Okay, so what did I do? My intuitive nature is that I stopped the video and I just zoomed in and I got the MC. So I ran the MC over 3 different vetting platforms, all of which said they were approved. See the problem? This is a huge problem too, is that you can't rely on vetting tools as the one and done when you're vetting carriers. There's so much more detail to vetting carriers than just using a damn tool and thinking that, hey, you know what? This is my savior. I've got a good one here. Past experiences that you've got to start making phone calls. You got to look at email address, not this Gmail crap that's out there. You've got to drill in. The speed is going to kill you guys. You have to take the extra effort by due diligence. Hell with profits over due diligence. Switch that around. Due diligence first, profits last. All right. And drill into this to save your asses. I mean, seriously, I'm not saying that I'm against vetting tools. There are red flag tools. They give you like a, hey, if I was you, I would drill into this a little bit deeper. But it's not a one and done. And with experience, and you'll learn this with training guides and work instructions. I hope that brokers are now building those kind of things. So when they get new hires in, especially college kids that are coming on board that have no background experience, have a trainer, an educated guy that can sit with them and walk them through the processes. And number one is fraud. Fraud prevention and protecting your brand image and reputation at all costs. That's where we are right now. And John and I have had this conversation a gazillion times, and it's a huge missing part of the industry that needs to be enforced. And that's it. I mean, you're talking about accountability and all those kind of things. This is another step that you guys have to take in order to do that. Do I have a work instruction? Yeah. Did I put one together? Yeah. And I gave it to John, and John has it. And he can tell you that, yeah, there's such a thing that I put together that's not ironclad, because we're never going to stop fraud and these things happen, but we can minimize it to get by, to feel a little bit more comfortable in what we do operationally.
And the battling of the fraud is coming through a compliance or safety issue. We always knew that, you know, fraud and compliance and safety were always closely linked, you know, brother and sister, really. So it's nice to see a breakthrough, even though this isn't a cargo theft or fraud specific example. It's nice that it's still pushing the conversation. And like I said, bringing everyone closer, you know, the accountability on everyone's side.
Yeah, we every business professional in the industry right now really needs to take stock of what's happening. I mean, really what's taking place is we're needing to help the culture of the industry shift from a trust culture to the accountability side. And really the SCOTUS decision is kind of a kick out the door for getting to the accountability side. And you know, it just means more people need to do more things to check over what's happening in front of us. You know, we like Andy was saying, like real-time data. We have the technology. Let's start using it. You know, that it doesn't mean you have to upheaval every part of your process, every part of your company, but there do need to be things, and there are solutions out there that you can deploy in your company to protect yourself against these things. Use them. You know, look into them, find the one that best fits your model and start using it. That's going to be the best way to protect yourself against this stuff. And along the lines of the shipper stuff, I mean, you know, when it comes to the shipper being liable, at the end of the day, you know, what is it, tort cases, you know, cases of wrongdoing or whatever, it's going to follow the money. Whoever has the most money is going to be the biggest target for for the lawyers to aim at. And if they can prove their case in front of a jury and get the jury swayed to their side, you could be liable. And this, I think this decision really puts it in the headlines for everybody. So
That's what frustrated me about the decision the most, was the win it just gave the plaintiff attorneys. That's what frustrated me and had my jaw dropping at that 9-0 decision. And one of the things I want to make sure we get in before the time runs out is, if anybody's not aware of Blue Wire yet, make sure you learn about Blue Wire. Blue Wire is now partnering with FMCSA, and I forget the different divisions of the DOT, to give scores on all DOTs. So there's no more excuse of, hey, 94% are unrated. They're going to have a scoring for all DOTs. They're doing a platform for focused on the cross-border stuff. But if you look at Steve Bryan's and some of his team's posts, you can learn more about that on LinkedIn. But that's going to give a rating for all motor carriers. And so it kind of goes to the standards. Like, I don't know if the government's going to say that's okay to use, and that could be some kind of new de facto standard or something. Who knows? Until we have some,
yeah, there has to be a small amount of, or at least a reasonable amount of checklist items, or, hey guys, this is the one standard. If it's above a 90, let's just pick an arbitrary number, this is the de facto standard. And obviously we can just wait on the government to try to give us the standard, or, you know, as we're doing now as a collective industry group, start promoting what we think should be. I know it'll always be a moving target, but some type of playbook, right, that we can maybe give to government to say, don't use that arbitrary number, use this set of standard, whatever. But I'm sure that could be a collective group effort. But
I would think that we're going to be seeing a lot of freight brokers taking a look at safety scores and different violations, and really have to have a come to Jesus. And they are going to start making serious decisions today on the different carriers that they use. But then suddenly they're going to find themselves losing capacity very quickly based on those decisions. And then they're going to soften those decisions a little bit more to bring that capacity back. There's going to be a balancing act that has to take place. The question is how much liability will freight brokers want to take on in order to maintain that balancing act and maintain their transporter base? This is going to be a challenging question for the future.
I think to JR's comment earlier, some of the platforms let the freight brokers put their own guidelines and guardrails in place. So by a lot of the attorneys I've spoken with over the years said, well, by them making that conscious decision is making them liable if they didn't do the right guardrails in place. So it's not the platform's fault. It's the freight broker that put those certain guardrails in place. So that's something to really keep an eye on.
Well, you know what, to your point too, Andy, being an ex-shipper, you need to, to drill in, do some research, and knowledge finding on the shipper, not the shippers, but the brokers you're doing business with. Do they have the background that's necessary? Do they meet your needs? That's what I used to do when I was a shipper. I wanted to know, who they were, what's their background? Do they fit my needs? How much knowledge do they have? What is their mode that they're best at? So forth and so on. Just don't go for the cheapest rate, because, right, John, the cheapest will be the most expensive decision that you'll ever make, and that's about 1,000 times more now. And I've always said that cheapest doesn't always win. It kind of destroys you. And you got to be careful when you're doing that. There's a lot at stake now, a lot. Be careful.
What the price is at the front is not what the cost is a year or 5 later.
Correct. Boom. Nailed it.
We're going to be seeing some very interesting rate shifts across the industry. We've already seen some very interesting stuff over the course of the last few months, with FMCSA knocking out thousands of non-domicile CDLs, other CDLs being revoked because they were issued improperly. The fuel prices are pushing a lot of carriers off the road while they're sitting at this level. So what then becomes of rates now that we have this new decision coming in? Freight brokers are going to have to put in more of their own skin into the game. So rates, again, are going to continue an upward pressure on all sides. This is going to be an interesting challenge to see how people rate freight moving forward.
And more carriers won't get loads, because the newer carriers are going to be like, well, I can't get past this broker's vetting or whatever standard guardrails, to use Andy's language. So they're all using the same language, the rules they put in place, which then raises the prices even more. And then shippers are going to go, hey, why can't you get this covered? And they're like, we're holding the liability now more, or at least we're sharing it more with you now, technically. So I can't book as many. So it's going to be a domino effect for sure.
That's a great, pop that up again about the 10,000 pound ones, John. You know what? How about these guys? We're not just talking about all the modes that we know of, but how about this expedited under 10,000 pounds?
Yeah,
stuff like that. You guys got to be careful about this kind of stuff too, because that also pulls into the liability structure. Anybody that moves freight is going to be liable and be pulled in. So these guys, they don't even have DOT numbers or anything like that, and they can work around the clock 24/7, 365. They can fall asleep behind the wheel and crash and kill somebody, and you hire them. You're screwed. You've got to drill into these guys out there, guys. There's work to be done.
Yeah, and that's what's tricky from the freight broker standpoint is there's a lot of misunderstandings. I see it on LinkedIn a lot about double broker. Well, it's not necessarily a double broker if motor carrier A contracts with a 8,000 pound vehicle to deliver on their behalf. That's not double brokering.
You're talking like final mile kind of deal.
I'm just talking about a normal load So there's a lot of misinformation about, hey, if a motor carrier with a trucking company gives the load to an independent contractor with a less than 10,000 GVW account, they don't have to have authority. So it's not brokering. They're contracting. If they're operating under the authority of the motor carrier A, that's okay. It's just contracted freight. The key, though, is what's the diligence going into selecting that individual independent contractor? Is that independent contractor have actual commercial coverage, insurance coverage? Because a lot of the trucking policies will exclude less than 10,000 GVW plus, or the insurance company that underwrote that trucking fleet didn't know that motor carrier was doing that with this cargo van. So we're working on some special programs with that for some partners. But that's some scary stuff. And then directly to answer the question about Blue Wire on the less than 10,000, I don't recall if they have something they're able to do on that just yet until they're required to get a DOT number, depending on the different scenarios. So I'm not sure on the Blue Wire.
Yeah, they got.
I would love to see the federal government step up in the under 10,000 pound expedite market. I would love to see mandates go out, even in the box truck and hotshot market, that the non-CDL side, to require them to operate as commercial motor vehicles in every sense of the law. It certainly would make a freight broker's job easier in trying to assess liability moving forward. It's the under 10,000 pound market is a shadow for most freight brokers, and unless they're experienced in handling that market, the exposure there is going to be quite extreme. I wholeheartedly agree with
it. A lot of those actually are over 10,000 pounds and aren't properly handled. Because as soon as they put a trailer on that's carrying more than a combined 10,000.
Yep.
Different ballgame.
True. How do you know though?
That's the key.
Well,
those
violations do come up.
You see, but here's the thing. Here's the thing, John and Andy too. I mean, we were talking about standardization, with the freight carriers and all of that. I think it needs to go across the whole board. Whether if it's a box truck or what, anybody that moves freight, that's moving something like hot shot, even a single package, that's in a car. That's they may not be commercial, but they're working for somebody and they get into a head-on collision and they've got a package that they're delivering. It could happen at any given moment. I think this is going to grow out like big time, and they're going to start pulling in a lot of different entities into this overall. It's not just going to be for these carriers. It's going to go for the box trucks and everybody that's involved. Because if the brokers are getting pulled in and the shippers are getting pulled in, most likely tools too, it's going to go all over the place. I can just see this escalating big time.
It's more of a
lawyers and state level.
It's a fundamental, and almost like a philosophical question that we're going to be working out all together, because it's like, okay, we're about to send X amount of weight out into the public, and this is a shared activity, right? It's not just the driver driving it, it's the broker who assigned it, the shipper loaded the product. So we've got this weird dynamic of we all share this, don't even call it liability, just the shared responsibility of this heavy freaking object moving down the road that's going to interact with other random humans. So it's like that mindset going in is obviously part of the decision for SCOTUS, but yeah, you take that example like you just talked about, Jeff, and you scale it down to, okay, are we talking about Uber Eats hiring a driver to deliver? It's like, because we're not talking about the cargo it's transferring, we're talking about safety. So it's like, where does it stop? Where does it? And yeah, we need someone, industry, government, to put what is the framework so we can start actually trying to attack a target rather than everyone going, I think this is going to be it. No, I think it's going to be this. Yeah, it's going to be a mess, but I think it will be a net positive. It's just going to take a few years to unfold, unfortunately. So,
yeah, I mean, it will be really interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead and finish your comment, Eric.
I was gonna say it will be really interesting to see which states are the first states to push out guidelines and standards, and then what the difference is between all those states, and if that pushes the federal government to make an overall standard for the nation. I mean, it's
where the accident occurred, right? Not the origin of pickup. Like it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, we Alex and I, when we were brokering together, it was, we had situations where something happened in Oklahoma, and it was, I mean, like you think you have control of the process, and then a whole nother entity comes in after an accident, and everything can be completely taken out of your hands, and there's nothing you can do but either pay a bill or say keep the freight. It's a crazy industry, and there's a lot going on in different states. So I mean, that's really what I'm looking forward to, is just to see how each state really digests what the SCOTUS is trying to say brokers need to start doing. And I mean, ultimately what everybody needs to start doing. Again, this really doesn't, I know that the big headline says broker, but I mean, we do have to keep in mind, this is something that's going to affect the entire industry. Every party that plays in it is going to have to change the game a little bit. And communication is going to be tantamount. If there's something I pulled out of the Driver Legitimacy Summit in February in Atlanta, it was that communication is extremely poor in this industry. And that's something we have to get better at. We have to communicate better. We have to find new channels, build new channels, and make the industry cohesive again, because it's really not anymore. I know trust kept it together for a while, but we're past the point of trust, and now it's, accountability, or for, lack of other words, trust but verify.
You know what? The state level is going to set precedents on every other state out there. Once one case goes there and the liability is settled, they're going to use that case study, other states, and then they're going to adapt it, and then they're going to add on to it, and it's going to be like escalate across the whole country. They're just going to start pulling these cases, and that's a good point, and they're going to start referencing them, and then you're going to see, laws and these, these rules, regulations, and mandates, and all of that being pulled out of these cases. That's going to set the standard for the whole country, as they're pushed through the courts. I can just see that happening right now. It just seems very, very logical.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're coming up on the last 10 minutes that we have. And what I want to go through real quick is winners and losers. Who wins, who loses as a result of this decision? Jeff, who do you think's a loser here?
I think the small brokers out there that don't have any processes in place. I think even the larger brokers out there that don't have guidelines or work instructions or anything for new hires or anything that's going to put them in harm's way. Also, carriers out there, when insurance starts rising, to what avail, I don't know. They may not be able to afford it. You might see a mass exodus because the risk is just too high for them to operate, in this industry. So I think those three.
Andy, who do you think loses?
I'd agree with what Jeff said. The motor carriers and the insurance premiums going back to my background, it's like increased insurance and just the legal defense. I don't know if it's going to be an extra $1,000 per unit for an extra defense cost built in or what, but just building in those defense costs and the insurance premiums, let alone the verdicts, it's going to be. So
on top,
and to clarify that,
on top of the 10-15% annual increases that even spotless carriers are seeing these days, we expect to see more of that.
Yeah.
Okay, Alex, who do you think are the losers here?
Yeah, just in the short term, if I have to narrow it down to one, it's definitely owner operators, just because they're going to be pushed out of more. Now, again, the motor carriers that are taking care of their business and their compliance, and they've always done things to the book, I think they'll win. But the small motor carriers, not that they were being negligent on purpose necessarily, but if they're just not keeping quite up to snuff, then they're just getting denied more loads when really they might be trying their best, but they need to obviously examine their own processes as an owner op, or at least a smaller carrier. So I think initially, as far as winning loads or winning jobs, they might have a little bit more difficulty. But I think in the end, to put it on its head, everyone's going to end up winning in this scenario. It's just, can everyone adjust to the new normal? And I think we will. It's just going to take a lot longer.
Eric.
Yeah, I mean, everybody hit the nail on the head. I think really the only thing I can add is, at the end of the day, this is going to help the America win. It's gonna tighten the gap for these bad actors to be involved. More eyes are going to be on the processes that all exist, and we're going to, quite frankly, On-Site started because they pissed us off, and we're happy to be a part of the fight and taking it to them, and we're happy that everyone who's in this call and anyone listening or anybody else taking action towards safety, compliance, and keeping the fraudulent carriers out of here. I think that's best for America. I understand that some people are definitely going to get hurt. No regulation is ever passed without some party being disadvantaged or hurt by it. But at the end of the day, it's like, what is life worth? With all the deaths that happen, all the injuries that completely change lives over the course of what they've experienced. It's just, I mean, the numbers are just astronomical, and the cost of fraud to the national economy is also just insane when you draft it out. I mean, just to touch real quick on something we initially talked about was, the out of service violations from DOT week. I mean, that's only what was caught. that's not including all the carriers that stopped moving freight during that period of time. And so it's like, while we were reaching 30%, 30 to 35%, somewhere in there, as far as who was being taken off the road during that period, I mean, it's scary to say, but I mean, it might be closer to 50 who need to be out of service, 50%. So it's just, I think this will go a long way to helping move the industry towards the direction that we've been talking about, which is accountability. It has to happen. And, this isn't necessarily the way I would have preferred it to take place, but, at the end of the day, we have to deal with the cards we're dealt. So at least we got, strong people in the industry to help move it forward. So
I would offer another potential loser is going to be the load boards. I think the load boards have being, as Jeff calls it, the petri dish of fraud. There's going to be an additional set of liability for brokers that operate off the load boards. I think there's going to be a huge examination as far as that goes. So I expect to see some interesting things happen at DAT and truck stop as a result of this. Let's talk about winners. Andy, I know your time is short. You go first.
Winners, vetting platforms. Coincidental that you had 7, I think, of the top vetting platforms up in DC yesterday at FMCSA. They've been doing a great job to help the industry, and now it's become more of a need to have. And then platforms like ours on the insurance side of things, it makes us more of a need to have than a nice to have.
Jeff, you.
Those in the industry that put due diligence over profits. I think those are the ones that are going to go through this perfect storm that we're in right now. Those that fail to do so, they'll pay a price.
Alex.
I have to add plaintiff attorneys. Those are unfortunately the winners.
The attorneys absolutely are our biggest winners in all this. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Alex, your thought.
Yeah, I'll speak selfishly just for a second. Our company has been focused on helping shippers at the point of pickup, and this just now enhances the broker and shipper relationships that were already strong, but now brokers can have a little bit more teeth and say, hey, shipper, we need to introduce some new protocols. Let's work closer together. And that's kind of where we hope to step in. So if anyone is either a warehouse themselves that wants higher verification, vetting, real-time data at the docks, obviously contact us. Or if you're a broker who is servicing a shipper that needs this, so you need to help them help you, contact us as well. But I do think the winners are warehouses who, like Jeff said, say we need to slow down to speed up, improve our processes, because obviously we're not all Mother Teresa's. We all want to make money in this industry, but we don't want to do it over people, not profits over people. You do things right, you slow down, you treat people the way you want to be treated. Long term, you're going to make the money you want to make, regardless of what level you're trying to pursue life at, job, business, career, whatever. So,
Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I as much as I agree with everybody here on their points, I mean, I still will just go back to what I said earlier. I mean, American people, America wins by more vetting, more eyes on the processes, and just making sure that our logistics networks are tight. We've been playing really loosey goosey, and I'm excited, and it's a challenge. The SCOTUS decision is a challenge for everybody, and either people are going to step up to the challenge or they're going to bow out. So I'm ready to see who the strong players are, and lock arms with the rest of the industry and get things moving in the right direction. So.
Okay, well, we need to go ahead and wrap this up. Andy, any last thoughts, plugs, etc.?
Yeah, no, just appreciate the conversation. Like we all decided or discussed, it's going to be 3-5+ years before we really know where the dust settles on this, until legal precedents are set state by state. To Alex's point on, well, which state is the venue? They're going to be fighting over various states for venue now. It might not be where the accident is. It might be where it was dispatched out of. There's a whole bunch of negotiations that come to that. But anyway, if we can help anybody on the call, freight brokers especially, our company is focused on insurance operations for the transportation retail agencies. That way we're providing them the instant source of truth insurance certificates to platforms that are out there. They don't have to come direct to us. They can come through existing platforms, but just use our live real-time data. So, hey, if you're dispatching unit 4, that unit 4 is covered. If Eric's driving it, it's covered. Or if Alex driving it, it might not be covered. Make sure you know if the vehicle and or driver's covered.
Thank you very much, Andy. Appreciate your time. I know you need to bow out, so if you got to jump out before we finish, go right ahead. Thank you. Alex, I want to give you a shot and to make your plugs.
Yeah, just kind of mentioned on there, like I said, we're looking for partnerships. So brokers, if you have warehouses that you work with or you are a warehouse, contact us. Our platform is designed to authenticate and actually use your vetting that you did on the front end, make it back end authenticate when that physical driver and truck does show up at your dock to get loaded. So that's what it's all designed around. There's some efficiency features as well to help your warehouse improve some things, some certain KPIs, things like that. So like I said, we're just looking for connections, brokers. If you know, hey, this customer is a pain to deal with, but you have a good relationship with them and they'd be open to listening to what you can help them provide, not only improve their business, but obviously help you as a broker. Now that you have more liability, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on there, Alex Snook. And then also my email's alex@verifyonsite, and that's spelled SIGHT. So thanks again for the podcast, John.
Eric, you want to follow up?
Yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out to me as well for the on-site team. You can check us out at verifyonsite.com. I think that's something Alex probably already said, but you can reach me at the same email address, just ERRICK at the front end in front of the @ sign. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect. Where I'm always, my ears are always open. If you think there's something we could do better, if you want to learn more about our product and give us feedback, we're always interested in new lenses on how to implement the product and make it cohesive for the entire industry. We're starting with shippers because we think that's the first domino for our product, and kind of the vision, the direction we have with where we're going. But eventually we want to benefit carriers and brokers as well in the entire ecosystem. So.
Well, I want to offer you guys at On-Site congratulations on your successful demonstration over at BCS. Good luck to you guys. I wish you guys all the best. Jeff, any plugs, final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. No pun intended, but that's what my company RGTX is built on-site at enterprise shippers for over 38 years. Building work instructions, process improvement plans, and setting standards for facilities across enterprise shippers. Now you know the reason why I'm a dedicated logistics provider. I'm not a transactional broker, and I am glad that I'm in this situation that I am, and that is my business model. So it minimizes my shippers' threat against fraud. I've been there. I protected brands, image, and reputations for many, many years. If you want to get in contact with me, I'm on LinkedIn constantly all the time. And you can reach me at Jeff D at RGTX Logistics Solutions, or actually rgtxlogistics.com.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to discuss this. A special programming note: we do have another special live episode that we're going to be doing on Monday at noon Eastern. We will have members of the board of the task force on to talk about Dale Prax and his group of Washington 7, I'm calling them, the meeting that they had in Washington yesterday with regulators, and I believe they also met with a couple people in Congress to talk about trucking issues. And it is the first that we are aware of, first of its kind meeting where we had competing platforms joining together as a unified voice to represent the industry. So I'm very much looking forward to that conversation. Again, that's going to be Monday at noon Eastern time. If you're seeing this live, you'll catch that one live where you're watching it. If you have any questions, concerns, issues, and you want to speak to any of our panelists, if you are on LinkedIn, go to the post. Their names are highlighted. You can go ahead and click on them and interact with them through LinkedIn. So please be sure to check that out. Ladies and gentlemen, it was great having you today. Hope to, well, I know we're going to see a whole host of new things that are coming out about this. New opinions are going to be registered. So I know I'm going to be watching. Please pay attention. This is going to be an important issue for a long time to come. Your check is on the table. Please make sure you tip out your server, and we will catch you next time on the TikTok Diner.